very early in the morning, and two gentlemen walk into a bar. Mac and the organ player. And they step in through the bar door, and there's various sundry of people out there, and there's a thick smoke of cigars, and the sour smell of whiskey still lingers in the air. Over to the right, there's a bartender washing out a whiskey glass with a dirty rag, about ready to fill it up again with some whiskey. And these two gentlemen stare around the room and then separate. Behind them walks through, dressed in all of his finery, the rail baron, Tom Gray. And as they look around the room, they see on the far side of the room there's a little podium, a little stage over there. And they head that direction. And they push the guy standing there in a hat to the side and said, John doesn't know what he's talking about because he wasn't there. Boo. Okay, so that sets the scene unofficially. So now I'm thinking of some comment for that, but I couldn't think of it fast enough. Anyway, the official story is this. Session number 5, the Locomotive Reno, a pictorial survey by Mike Collins and Stephen Drew. And since our last history conference 2 years ago, Tom Gray and the Virginia Trucking Railroad Company in Virginia City were successful in purchasing the last privately owned Virginia Truckee steam locomotive, the historic 1872 locomotive, Reno, from Old Tucson Studios in Tucson, Arizona, nothing to do with the bar. After an absence of 75 years, the fabled engine has finally returned to Nevada. And once again, in Virginia City, the locomotive is now on public display for all to see, where initial assessment and stabilization work is underway. To conclude our session today, Mike and Stephen have put together a pictorial survey or an overview of one of the V&T's most famous and highly visible locomotives, the Virginia Truckee Reno. Mike, Stephen, forgive me, push me aside. As slowly they move to the front of the room.
We were contemplating things if I could. We have Tom Gray's here today, and we want to thank Tom for bringing the Reno back to Nevada and up to Virginia City. We were going to have another talk by another person, and that person had to bail out. So we put everything on the sidetrack and moved the Reno to the main line, and we gave it eyeball. So Stephen and I had put together this program. Stephen did most of these photographs here, and I gave a talk last night on the modeling of the Reno. So we'll go through this and see what we can do here. Okay, go ahead. This is a Reno after 1907, after it had been converted to oil, and it still has it was before 1917 because it still has the oil lamp on the front, which is raised up. But this is, of course, Virginia City. The car shed there on the left-hand side, or my right-hand side if you're looking at it. Yeah, okay. If I can get my rights to my left, we're okay. Oh, I gotta get this thing too. Which hand? These are the two drawings that I had done earlier. We talked about last night a little bit. The first one up there is when it was around 1878, I think that is, and then or 1878, and then down below the 1880s or 1890s. You can see the various differences between the locomotives at that time. The top view, you see it has the diamond stack on it, and in the bottom view it has the bonnet stack on it. Also in the bottom view you note that the cab sits a lot higher than it does in the upper view, and at that time between 1878 or and 1890 they did change the cab out. It had been in a couple of wrecks. vote at the time. So entered January 10th, 1872 by Baldwin Locomotive Works, outshop May of 1872 by Baldwin Locomotive Works. Received July 2nd of 1872 at Steamboat, Nevada. And then they took it apart and moved it over to Carson City, I guess, and then put it together. All right, no, did they do that, Stephen?
No, it used on the Reno division that finally ran down to Carson.
Yeah, okay, they ran it on the Reno division. On the left is the specifications for it, Baldwin specifications for it, and on the right is a letter from Baldwin to Yerington. This is that first view of it. This is the Watkins view in 1878, probably. He was up there twice in 1876 and 1878. So this is one of his mammoth prints. And you can see here we have the diamond stack on it. When it was ordered with a bonnet stack. But we don't know if it came with a bonnet stack or if it came with a diamond stack. But apparently, but by this time, of course, it had the diamond stack on it. Here it already has the straight air. Straight air was added to the V&T cars in 1874. The 4 cars here, and then on the rear is the Central Pacific sleeping car that they would leave at Carson City. So this is taken in Carson City. But you can see, let me see here. Here's your 6-inch air pump. Still has crosshead pumps over here for the water. Now we go up to 1888, 1890. It's Crockwell. Photographed James H. Crockwell, who was a photographer in Virginia City. He left in 1890 and went back to Salt Lake City, where he came from. So this is the view of it. He has the one on the Crown Point Trestle. I think we'll see that in a minute here. We now have the bonnet stack. We still have the 6-inch air pump, but it's been changed a little bit. We have an injector on this side now instead of the water pump. And there is a water pump on the other side, though, on the fireman's side. And notice how high the cab is here on this, and you see how high it is above the engineer. The rivets on this thing are vertical at this time. It says V&TRR on it. And here it is on the Crown Point Trestle at the same date. And you can see the 4 cars here. You got the 13, or the 13 and the 14. I think that's number 3, and then number 17 in the rear. And the number 3 is a smoking car at this time. So in those days, most of your women were not allowed to smoke, of course. So they sat in the 17, and all the men that smoked and whatever they did, they sat in the smoking car, number 3. And it was lettered that way, a smoking car. So here on the bottom, you can see the lettering on it, V&TRR. And on the other side, whoop, sorry, wrong button. Doing the same thing Marilyn did here. All right, I gotta go back. Hang on, guys. Yeah. Well, the way the buttons are on this thing is one's right in the middle, then you hit the wrong button. And I want to get the light view. There we go. All right, you can see right there, that's the water pump on the other side, on the fireman's side. And here's your injector on the engineer's side. So you have a water pump on one side, and then the injector on the other side. Yerington did not like injectors, but he ended up having to put them on anyway. And you still see the 6-inch pump. No brakes on the locomotive, no brakes on the tender, just straight air back to the cars. You can see the double hoses between the 2 cars here going to the straight air. And I mentioned last night that I thought these were a little bit different, and Kyle mentioned that the reason they did it, because one was a female and the other was a male. So you had to have 2 hoses to couple them up, because they wouldn't couple up if you just had one hose going between the cars. So that was something new to me. We learn something new every day.
Yeah.
1901, the beautiful, nice side view shot of the Reno. Still Lincoln pin couplers, even though they had put Miller hooks on the passenger cars, they did put a Miller attachment onto the rear of the tender, and we still need to find out what that looked like. Up to now we're up with an 8-inch ballroom pump, and we have an air brake here, or air cylinder going down to the brake shoes on the locomotive. So this was a major change at that time. Wood burner still, and the skin on the outside of the tender had been changed, and the rivets now are going across horizontally across double rivets here, offset. (1907), it was the first V&T locomotive to be converted to oil. So this is a good view of it. It's still an oil headlight, a little bit different than the previous one, raised up more. It also has a wood pilot and automatic brakes. Automatic brakes were, well, Sam's semi-automatic brakes were applied in 1897. The ICC, I guess it was, at that time told them that they were no good. So he had to put automatic brakes on, and these are Tar automatic brakes on the front here. And at that time they had to change the pilots out because they couldn't couple the cars up. So they went to the wood style pilot at this time. And you can see the 8-inch, by this time they went from the 8-inch to a 9.5-inch air brake here. And you can see the ribs on this, which indicates it's a 9.5. You have an equalizing reservoir right there, and then you have another reservoir back here. And the high cab, of course. Virginia City. Another shot of it, about the same time, a straight stack still. The wood pilot, of course, like we talked about. Not too many changes at this time. This is the summer train in Virginia City, as Stephen has recorded here. Another shot of it in Reno. Morning passenger train, June 17th of 1908 at the SP Depot. Still oil headlight and a 9.5-inch pump, like I said, on the engine and the brakes. Not too many changes at this time. Another shot of it. Stanley Palmer, 1908, Reno. Stanley Palmer, Stephen, what? He lived in Reno, and did he go to UNR?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, okay, he went to UNR.
09.
Yeah. Another nice shot of it there with a cap stack on top. Not a cap stack, but you got a bracket on there on top of the stack. By this time, which is kind of interesting that they did, the V&T put these fancy covers on the front of the cylinders. They did this on the Reno and also on the Genoa. They never did do it on the Inyo. The Inyo had the plain ones all the time. No step here yet. They did have a step up here for the lamp so that the brakeman could get up and get the lamp to work, the headlight, I should say. A tower coupler on the front with the, you can still link it to a Lincoln pin coupler if you needed to on the front there. Another Stanley Palmer shot in 1908 at the Reno, coming across the bridge just by the water tank. Two photographs of it coming across the Crown Point Trestle. And 1911 is the top one. We have coaches number 1, number 2, number 4, and the 17 again. So basically, the 4 replaced the 3 as a smoking car at that time. And the winter passenger train, numbers 14, 13, 3, and 18. So we're back to the 3 as a smoking car. the V&T would change out the passenger train every year. So you go from the summer train to the winter train and then back to the summer train. And in between, they would take the 4 cars into the shop and then either repaint them or revarnish them or whatever they needed to do to work on the cars, you know. But they were constantly, they were always seemed to be, you know, taking good care of their passenger cars. So. March of 1911, arriving in Carson City, David Welch photo. And we have now, we have the cap stack on top. You can't really see it too well here, but you have the cap stack instead of just a straight smoke gun stack. Here's a better photo of it. Still an oil burning headlight or whatever on the headlight. Cap stack up here. 1911, 1912, Frank Jukes photo. Yeah, David Welch here, he engineer with David Welch at that time. Safety appliances and on the handrails. We'll show you a little bit better picture of that in one of the other photographs here. What they did, the ICC came out and said you gotta have safety handrails. So instead of having the small handrail up here in the cab, they went all the way down. I think we'll have another photograph of that in a minute here. Taking fuel oil in Carson City in 1919. All right, and James Savage was the engineer here. And on the right is David Welch. Now we have the pile national generator and our 32 volt DC electric headlights. So 1917, at the end of 1917, they added a generator up here on top, and you can see the exhaust pipe going all the way back up over the cab, okay? So they went from that to the electric headlight in place of the oil headlight, and then they put it down more on front of the stand, lighting stand. Oh, that's my drawing, isn't it? It was kind of interesting because I had not done a drawing of the engine later on. And when Steve and I talked about this, putting this little program on, I said, okay, I'll put everything on the sidetrack and we'll get the Reno out here and start putting stuff on it. So whatever I found in my drawings, I was able to take this. Here's your generator coming up. Here's your 9.5-inch air pumps that I put on. Steven said, oh, there was a star on the headlight, so I was able even to put the star up on the headlight. Air tank, big air tank on the back. Here's your equalizing reservoir, and then your other air tank up here, and your valves on the back. Toolbox up here, another toolbox down here that they had for sand and stuff like that. And step on the rear. All right, we had that on another locomotive. So by taking my other CAD drawings that I had of various locomotives, I was able to scavenge this thing and put it together. And Tom, we want to give you this drawing of this locomotive, and we'll have a coffee for you, okay? Stephen, you got anything you want to add?
No, that's wonderful, Mike.
Okay, so I think we're okay there, John.
Any other pictures?
I think that was it, wasn't it?
No.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Like I said, Stephen put this together and I threw that one in there and I thought I threw it on the end. Okay, but I didn't. So various photographs of it with the cap stack after 1917 and of course Virginia City. Various different views of it. Down in Carson City, here's the valuation office right back here. That when the 1916, 1917 guys came to do the ICC valuation, they worked out of that office. And that used to be the office for the lumber company of Tahoe. So it ties into what Doug was talking about a little while ago. More pictures of it in Carson City. And up here at the freight depot in Virginia City up here. 1919 in Virginia City, Paul Cameronton, Ed Peterson, and Lauren Welch. Okay, yeah, Grove Russell and William White. Okay, I'm looking at these sideways, so. Here it is at the local. This is the local that would run up from Carson City to Virginia City. A lot of times you see photographs with the 25. At this time they were using the 11. It was no longer being used on the daily passenger train as much, but they did use it on the local sometimes. So you have either 15 or 16 behind the 11, and then you have the little second or first 21 behind that, okay? And that's this photograph here. And then a couple more photographs of it with the cap stack. 1931, okay? And there was talk about the driver brace on the right, on the right inside driver. And some of the locomotives I know, like on the Inyo, the driver is cracked, so they can only run it, a few times a year. But looking at the locomotive, we did not see any cracks in it the other day. Going out of town, when it was sold, it was used in the movie Union Pacific, and it was used there on loan to Paramount. So it went out of town in what, 1937, wasn't it? Yeah, okay, so these are 1933, but about that time. A little bit ahead of myself. Isn't that an auto Perry on top?
I don't think that one is. You had some auto Perry earlier.
Yeah, okay. I have that photograph and I thought, no, okay, it's not one I hit. Yeah. 1937 over here on the right, Gilbert Dees photograph. Oh, I want to show you here. You have the steps here, so they would take, I think they took one of the stays off and they put the step on for that, for the brakeman, instead of having to stand on front of it like they did before. And the cap stack. 1937, Al Phelps photo. On the right is 1938, a Walter Young photo. And then 1938 down in Minden again. So, a nice shot of it there in the snow. 1938, Carson City. Nice detailed shot of the front of it. You can see the fancy covers for the steam, for the cylinders here. You can see the step here on the pilot, and then the bar going all the way across for the brakeman so they wouldn't fall off. All right. And here's a good shot of the star up here, you can see. And they had the electric headlights at this time, so they had a bracket up here, and the bracket is still on the locomotive. I saw it yesterday when we were over there, so they could hang the electric headlights up here. Or actually, I guess you said they were electric, right?
Electrified marker lights, too.
Yeah, electrified marker lights, okay.
Class lights.
Yeah.
Mike, what's the story on the star?
What?
What's the story on the star?
The story on the star, Stephen. Stephen goes, well, it was interesting. He asked me to draw it, and I could not find a good photograph of it on the Reno. This is probably one of the better photographs. But it was also on the 25. So I found the star on the 25 and was able to figure out the dimensions of it on the 25 and then put it on the Reno. It probably was just something that one of the engineers liked and put it up there. It's just attached to the headlight is all it is. It's not anything, not an ICC requirement or anything like that. One other thing that Peter Ehrlich, a guy in Australia, pointed out, and I had not seen this before and hadn't thought about it, but they added extra lugs here onto the smoke box cover. They had one there, and I think a couple more over here. And I looked yesterday and they're still on there. Normally we just have that one there and we'd have this one over here and there. So I guess it must have been leaking a little bit. You don't want these things to leak because that just kills your draw. So they added these onto the Reno. Don't ask me why. Another photograph of 1938 in Carson City, Royal Graves. A good shot of it. You can see the air brakes on the side over there. You can see the pipe going up to the injectors here for the injectors going up to the boiler. Oh, double D Sanders at this time in Lynch. Double D Sanders were added. So these were air operated now instead of manually operated on the air Sanders. You had one pipe coming down on the front. I think the other pipe was for the air coming down. I haven't seen a pipe on the rear, but there might have been one. (1938), one of the last runs up to Virginia City. Ted Worm was up there, and he got a brakeman job for the day, and was able to ride to Reno up there and take these photographs. I think these are some of the photographs that are over here on auction by Hart Corbett, and Hart was able to get these photographs from him also. So various shots of it. This is scales here. Here's the super section house foreman's house. Here's the water tank. This is the shed for the foreman. Here's your speeder. Water car in the back over here, probably getting water, and the box car going up to Gold Hill. Nice shot of it. Oddfellows Reno Carson Special, Ted Warren, 1938. Probably that would be what, 15 or 16 behind it.
No, it's probably the 15.
Probably the 16. Okay.
15.
Yeah. What? 15?
15.
It's one of the two cars.
15 that night.
Yeah, one of them was already behind the roundhouse, and I think there was a tree growing up in front of it or something. So, doubleheader, one of the excursions that they had, California Nevada Railroad Historical Society excursion. Gerald Best's photograph of June 5th, 1938. So they're heading up to Virginia City, coming out of Reno here, out of Carson City, I'm sorry. On to Virginia City, Pacific Coast Chapter, Railway Locomotive and Historical Society. The fourth railroad wonder trip over the historic Virginia and Truckee Railway with our Chicago charter. So this was the Chicago group. They had two flat cars. Did the same thing again. Back, there we go. They had two flat cars here on the rear of the train, and then they had one of the, I think that's one of the drill coaches back here behind it. So this was their trip, and this was July 17, 1938. Get the right button here. There we go. Yeah, here's the two drill coaches that they were using at the time, and now here it has the coupler on the front is solid. It's not the jointed coupler like for the pin. What's interesting on these two drill cars is when they converted over from Lincoln pin couplers to Miller hooks, they could not get the Miller hooks onto the two drill cars because of the way the platforms were. You had on the Miller hooks, you had part of the platform was also a buffer, and they couldn't get that onto the drill coaches because they sat too low between the sills and the doorway, so they couldn't raise the platforms like they did on the other cars. So after that, these cars became secondary cars used on the locals and things like that instead of on the express train. So if you're building the model of the drill coach, you can't use it after 1878 on the express train. Ah, here we go, Paramount, okay. Got ahead of myself there earlier. It was used in the Cecil D. DeMille's Union Pacific movie. It was on loan to them. They did not sell it to them like they did the 22, I guess, wasn't it? Yeah. And so it was on loan to them, and they used it in the movie. If you see the movie Union Pacific, you'll see a lot of V&T locomotives in there. You get the Reno, and you get the, I think the 22's in there, and the 21, of course, the Valkyrie's in there. Very, very good movie. And this, this is kind of what saved a lot of the V&T equipment. So it was in a wreck, stage wreck on the railroad, or on the movie, and they took it back in to the shops there in LA and repaired it, and then they gave it back to the V&T, and they paid them $5,000 extra because of the damage to the locomotive. Couple of nice shots of it, 1941, California-Nevada Railroad Historical Society, Comstock Express, Al Rose colored photographs. Very nice shots of the Reno there. Another Al Rose photograph, and this is down in Minden. You see the two flat cars there, and the 19, coach 19 back here, and then the 18 behind it here, coach 18. And these are the two flat cars are the ex-Colorado Midland flat cars that they bought in the 20s. Last operated July 22nd, 1943 by the V&T. Sold March 1, 1945 for $5,000 to Low Inc. Metro Golden Mirror, or Meyer, it's in Culver City, California. Left Carson City on March 2nd, 1945. So out of the 3 V&T locomotives that were built by Baldwin, the 440s, this was the last one on the V&T Railroad. Used in several movies, 1947 to 1950, at least 28 motion pictures and television productions while owned by MGM. So if you're looking at old Western movies on TV, you'll probably either see the Reno or the Inyo in one of those movies. This is a drawing that I couldn't think of Frederick's first name. Frederick Shaw did in 1950 of the Reno, and this is one I had yesterday on the presentation of the model. This is what probably PFM did use when they modeled the HO scale Reno that they sold in 1958, 59. But anyway, this is probably the drawing that they used when they did that. But a beautiful drawing that Frederick Shaw did. It was also in Beebe's book, Steam Cars to the Comstock, and one of his Shaw's books that he put out, Lamps on Iron Ponies, I think it's called. It was in that book. This drawing now, I think, is owned by the California State Railroad Museum. MGM backlot, stored out there. You see it's been temporarily converted to a coal burner by they just stacking up coal against the oil tank there. Measuring tape for whenever they did movies, they had to figure out the height of it so that it wouldn't hit any buildings. One of the movies that I liked was the one with I think it was Jack Gibson, or yeah, I think that's who it was. He was a railroad guy that did circuses or something like that, I think. Yeah, Jackie Gleason, I think it was. And anyway, on one of his scenes, he has a photograph in the back, and it's a photograph of the V&T, that they use on Paramount. Oh, yeah, 1969, May 10, Promontory, Utah. How many people were at Promontory, Utah in 1950? I know there was a few of us here that were there in 1969. And I think, Dennis, you said you were there this last year?
I was there for both of them, yeah.
So Dennis, he went to the 50th and the 100th. So a few of us were there in 1969. Great to see actually four V&T locomotives back there at that time. So you had the 18, and the 12, the 18, the 11, and the 22, all back in Promontory. Actually, two of them were in Ogden, Utah, on flat cars. Sold in 1970 at the MG auction with V&T's coach 19 for $40,000 to Old Tucson Studios, Old Tucson, Arizona. Oh. 100 pounds working boiler pressure at that time. One of the old SP engineers over here ran it at Old Tucson, operating in 1974 in Old Tucson. These are some pictures that Bob Dockery took when he went back there. Marilyn Summerdorf picture here on the left, and the two pictures up on there, I think, were Bob Dockery's photographs when they were doing one of the movies back there. Two of the V&T, I think those are two V&T coaches up on behind it. They had actually they had the 19 and they had the number 1 back there, so that might be the other SP coach, I'm not sure. October of 1983, good back shot. Photographer, I think Bob Dockery took that. And marks here on the tender, right here, says 27 1/2 C 350. And what this tells you, Baldwin changed their numbering system just after they built this locomotive. Because if you go to the Genoa, which is the mate to the Reno, it has a different builder's number on it. But the 350 means that's the 350th locomotive built to that class. All right, so at that time when they built that engine in 1872, they had 350 of these engines that looked basically like the Reno. Now, I'll give you a little bit of info on that. On the drawing of the drawing number 20 that they used, it was set up for a straight boiler locomotive with a diamond stack. And on the side, they had indicated they could be used for either a straight boiler with a dome or a wagon top locomotive with the one steam dome. So you can, if you look at the photograph of a 440 someplace and it's got a straight boiler on it with double stacks, it could be basically a sister of the Reno. 1995, April, backlog fire at Old Tucson. So this is basically what it looked like after the fire. The cab was all burned off. The tender frame was pretty much all gone inside. But they needed to use it for another movie, so they had the cab rebuilt, and they phonied up the tender a little bit so they could use it for a couple of movies. New Mexico in 2005 for Into the West. So even after that, it got used again. And if you look at the Reno up in Virginia City, you will see the 119 on the tender. So that still shows up today. Purchased August 21 to 2021 by V&T RR Company. Arrived August 25th at Virginia and Truckee Tracks in Virginia City. So here's a picture of it, and I think if you rode the train yesterday, you were able to get out there and get a good view of the Reno. Preservation priorities. acquisition, stabilization, public display building. Tom wants to build a building for it so it can be undercover, so it won't be out in the elements like it is right now. Do an engineering assessment on it and then maybe return it to limited film use. So there's a future for the locomotive, a 150-year-old locomotive, so it still has a good future ahead of it, more than we do. John Duffy photograph of it there in Virginia City. You can see the 119 on the side of it here. And that's it now? All right. Tom, you want to come up with it?
Thanks, that was great. I love those photographs. There's so much I have to learn, and so much I'm learning every day. I was looking at that switch stand in the Virginia City yard, and we were looking at that today. And Cliff mentioned that was a three-way stub switch, and that looks like the same one in that picture. So I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But some of the other stuff, Stephen's really animate about car number 50, the Wells and French Derrick car built in 1874. So we got all the pieces, the sawdust and all the pieces, but I think someday someone can put that back together. So I think Cliff might make some new drawings of the truck assemblies. It's really an amazing piece of work. And then we were able to grab boxcar 1001. That was the blacksmith's car that the SP built for the Union Pacific movie. And then boxcar 1007. And they're not boxcars anymore, but we loaded that on one piece. And so there's a lot of stuff there. One of the little surprises was we found Central Pacific built handcar. And so I saw that was on the Derrick car in a lot of the old pictures. So we were able to grab that and some wheel sets, and Todd and a bunch of people, Lauren, have been teaching me what all this stuff's about. So we have a long ways to go, but we drew up a really nice building for it. And so that's the #1 priority, to get it, some kind of a shelter. And one thing about Old Tucson, they wanted, they were going to get a lot of criticism for the engine leaving. So one of the factors that let us have it is that it came back kind of home to the place where it used to run, the Lightning Express, the old depot. And then I actually bought it on Bob's 100th birthday to the day. So that was, so all that stuff is happening. So it's just really nice. Thanks.
Any questions on the Reno while you've got us captive here? Yes?
Was the Reno the most photographed locomotive on the VP?
I think it had to be the most popular with engine crews. Grover Russell said they just loved the engine. It ran like a jewel. It was on the head point of the Lightning Express more than any other locomotive. It says V&T probably more than any other engine to the people of Nevada for the 70 years that it ran. So certainly much loved, highly visible locomotive. Perhaps one of the most photographed engines on the railroad.
Yeah.
Yep. And how wonderful. Now we're coming up October 1st. Next time we meet, we'll mark the 150th anniversary of the completion of the V&T from Reno to Virginia City. And how nice that the Reno's preserved is now back in Nevada, thanks to the effort of Tom. Yeah.
Any more questions for anybody? Y'all ready to go home?
Take a nap.
Take a nap, yeah. Okay, John, you want to come up and kick him out?
Take it away, Mike.